Next podcast with Chris and Todd.
All right. Well, hey, welcome back.
This is happening
with Chris and Todd. It's good to have you here. Hey, I hope that whether you're turning in for the first time or you've been following along for a little bit, man, we're like season 3. Is this? I don't even know.
300. I don't know.
We got some episodes. I don't know how many episodes, but we got some. So you want to check them out? Great. That'd be awesome. We'd love it. Thanks for tuning in. And we're going to talk, as we've been talking about, just like different things like those next steps, but not just next steps, like what things are kind of important in your faith and things that you and I need to kind of make sure, for lack of a better word right now, like in our toolbox, that are important aspects of us, being who we are in Christ, but also how does that flow out of us as we live life and do life. So today we're going to talk about friendship. So it's a good thing we can meet and be friends, I suppose.
Good.
Will you be my friend, Todd?
Of course.
Score.
We started singing the song earlier.
Yeah, we did. You weren't singing with me, though.
No,
I didn't know if
sorry.
you were feeling it, Todd.
Yeah, well, that's true. Well, there you go.
I always go to Bismarcky, but you say he's just a friend. But you say he's just... Don't ever talk to a girl who says she just has a friend. Anyway, shout
It's
out
a
Kevin
different
Guthrie. Yeah,
podcast.
it is a different podcast for a different time. Love
Yeah.
Bismarcky. Good times.
Yes.
Anyway, I know you like things we just don't want to know about Pastor Chris.
Right.
All right.
I always find out who sings this song because I'm like, oh, I know that song. Oh, I didn't know that was from you because
Yeah.
you usually say the name like, what? Oh, okay, got it.
Oh man, good stuff. No, but man, yeah, friendship is. You and I have been. I would say, man, we've been friends for a while now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, man, almost 16 years.
Yep.
Crazy, because you came here to Fountain Springs, and I had just left here to go to Williston, and then you and I met at youth camp because we were both doing the youth pastor thing, and
We
so that was
were.
cool. So, and so I'll start it this way, like, so starting to meet friends sometimes in familiarity. I like jumping into familiarity really quick, even when I'm not as familiar. But that's just one of, maybe it's a strength, maybe it's a weakness. Like I started calling you Hot Toddy right away.
Yes, you did.
Like right away, I'm like, oh, Todd, Hot
Yeah.
Toddy, all right.
And I thought of the wrestler Scotty Too Hotty. And
There you go.
most people thought the drink. No, not me.
Yeah.
I go to wrestling references.
That's right. Nothing wrong with that. I, as your friend, I did not know that you had a propensity to love wrestling like you did.
Yes.
And then I found that out just like a few years ago.
Yeah.
But I remember my first friendship experience.
Okay.
I lived in Burnsville, Minnesota. We lived in a duplex. My dad was the pastor at a church in Burnsville, Minnesota. And there was a kid through our backyard in a cul-de-sac. And I went over and got up the courage to go over and say hello. My mom watched me walk across the yard, and his name was Corky. And this is back in the day, like Looney Tunes, right? And stuff like that. So I get to the door, knock on the door. I'm 3 years old, 4 years old already, and just like, hey, I want to be friends with this kid. And this dog comes running at me, this just big, long-haired red dog. And I freaked out. And they're like, it's okay, it's okay. I'm like, and I was scared out of my mind. Is Porky here?
Porky.
That was my first remembrance of like a friendship thing. And his name was Corky, and he and I were friends for a while before we moved away a couple of years and went somewhere else. So anyway, that's my first friendship thing.
For me, I think back of you had those elementary school friends
Yeah.
and some of that, and but they just kind of move on. But I remember one that was significant friend.
Yeah.
I remember it kind of started. I think he was a year older, but his name was Christopher. And I
Great
was in
name.
8th grade.
I mean, I'm a
then-
Christian, but I
yes,
mean, Christopher is
exactly.
just equally as
So he's in high
fantastic.
school, but remember his dad was going to be the assistant pastor
Okay.
at our
Okay.
church. So we're helping him move in, and I think I started the conversation by hey, do you play baseball? And he's like, yeah. And then I just left. It was really great move.
So your skills started early.
Yeah, it was not awesome. Luckily, he was like, all right, well, that's a start. We'll get somewhere after that. And so we became pretty good friends after that. But yeah, friendship's been, I think, when you're elementary and middle school and high school, you remember that. I think as an adult, man, friendship becomes harder.
Yeah, I would agree.
Because you got all the other responsibilities. Yes, you're friends with your spouse if you're married.
Yeah.
And you got your kids. You can
Yep.
do that. So sometimes you can just be like, well, I'm good.
Yeah.
I've got my coworkers,
Yep.
you know, those kind of things. But I think in reality, like, we're not good. There's
No.
a lot of people who, if you were to ask, hey, who's your friend outside of your family? I don't have one.
No, I'm really jealous of like those individuals that like live in the cul-de-sac where they grew up and they're like friends with like 3 or 4 of the people. Like, yeah, we've been here the whole time. We bought our parents' house. I'm like, I have never known that. Like I mean, yeah. And that's always, you've got to decipher between the reality of life and doing life and what's realistic. Right. And that's not realistic for me because I'm in ministry. And so I go where we believe God's leading us to. And so, I mean, and I think a lot of times, whether it's military is that way, right? Like you go where you're told to go, or it's time to go somewhere, or you get a job and you get offered something and you can't turn it down, or you feel led by God, or you're in ministry, whatever the case is. And I think so many times we want it to be so natural. We want it to be one of those things that just fits into this. Well, I'm going to easily find friends. It'll be great. But you're right. It doesn't work that way because something we're going to talk about in a podcast coming up is just intentionality and what does it look like to be intentional? And I think we do. We make excuses. We settle for just doing life and being okay with what we have. And then
Too busy.
yeah, or we make excuses, right? And then we find ourselves going, but there's got to be something more, right? Like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think some of the other parts come, like maybe we've gotten hurt in the past. You know, you were vulnerable with a friend or thought you had a good friend, and then it just backfires. So then it's become very hesitant. Like, nah, it doesn't seem like I need to have that.
Yeah,
that was more painful than
Mm-hmm.
helpful.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, so we start evaluating life that way, and you start looking at it, going, "Well, do I need one?"
Yeah.
And my argument would be is the danger of not having a friend. Yes, your spouse is great. Yes, your kids can be great. Maybe you have parents that are awesome. But there's something about having accountability with somebody outside of that that you can have some pretty honest conversations with. You can, as the scripture says, iron sharpens iron. Those are those dynamics.
Yeah.
And so that's why I would say being able to have friends is an important aspect in life.
Yeah.
And I would say when it comes to being a Christian, like, these are the people you need to be doing discipleship with in some levels.
Yep.
I understand you're going to have all different kinds of friends. Some of them are going to be on different levels.
Sure.
You know, you've got the connection friend, your ride or die friend.
Yeah.
They're like, you know, the crazy person that will defend you. But you're like, but I'm not bringing them to.
Yeah, we're gonna go hurt some people. Okay, whose car are we taking? Right. Like, I've never said that to anybody. My wife would be like worried. Like, what do we? How did we took a dark turn there, Chris?
Yeah.
Like,
but I think you understand. Like, there's just some friends you'd be like, yeah, if I needed someone, if I know who I would go to. But it doesn't go beyond that.
Yep.
Like, it's not, hey, this friendship where I actually get to connect with somebody, and it goes deeper than surface level stuff.
Yeah.
It goes deeper than the connection we made about, you know, hey, our kids are in the same team, or we work together. It's different than that.
there's a familiarity there that's really easy, right? Like, so I ride mountain bike. Sometimes I ride on the road every now and then, but I think there's 2 kinds of friends with mountain biking. And this just is one of those things that I had to learn really quickly when I started doing it more and more. There's the friend that, like, cause I'm the slow friend. Like, I'm just going to be honest. Like, I'm always the slow friend on the mountain bike, and I ride with people that are better than me. There's the friend that rides with you, and then when you catch up to them after finally getting there, they're like, okay, let's go. And you're like, I just need to catch my breath. And then there's the friend that you get there and you're like, and they're like, oh man, he needs a minute. And they just sit with you in that craziness of like, oh man, I should find faster friends. Anyway, and then you never get invited to ride anymore, whatever. But no, all that being said, but I think it's so true, right? Like we need those friends. We need those individuals that are more than just like the ride or die. Like there's people that, and we have to learn things about ourselves too, right? That's the hardest part about me. I realize as a friend, I'm a connector, and you know this about me. Like I reach out and connect, and I touch base with a lot of people. And early on in my life, I thought that was normal. I thought like, well, everybody reaches out, everybody did, you know, and then I would get frustrated when people don't, and it's okay. Like that's just a way that God wired me to reach out and connect in those ways. And just to say, like, I think you're alluding to, like, there are friends for different seasons and different moments and times. And And sometimes you have to get past yourself and realize that it's not them, it's you. And that's not always a fun realization either. When you realize you're not the bad friend, you're just, man, is your friendship going to change? Is it just going to be this, or is there something else there that can take it to a deeper level? And then in ministry, we learn, who can I share with? Who can I not share with? And who should I share with? And are they along for the ride? And all those things.
I think one of the things I've had to navigate is, you think you have a good relationship or a good friendship with somebody, but then they do something that's like, oh, what are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're there for that friend, but in the same breath, you're also going like, maybe we're not on the same page that I thought we were.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's hard. And sometimes that choice gets made for you before you can do anything about it.
I would agree.
I know you and I, like, even walking through COVID, that was just like, oh man, okay, thought we had friendship, and then cut off.
Yep.
And so those things happen that you're kind of like, whoa, like what just happened here? And some of that you've just got to let go.
Yep, absolutely.
Because
not easy, but you do. You have to get there.
It's painful, but you forgive and you go, because if you're not careful, you will lock onto, well, that's just how friendships go.
Yep.
No, not always. Yep. Or you'll try to avoid them because of pain again.
Yeah.
So part of it has been like, okay, I've learned I would love to have a relationship at this level.
Yeah.
But we're coming in here.
Yep.
And that's okay.
Yep.
That's where we're going to be. But I may find another person down the road who is here.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we try to push certain friendships to a certain level because we need them to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're giving them accessibility to things that we should not be giving accessibility to.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean having pretty honest conversations with somebody. You're like, they're not going to handle this well, or they haven't earned that.
Or if you have doubts about the trust level that you could have with them. Yeah.
Right.
That really is tough.
And so it becomes like, we're just on a different level. And then some of it could be spiritually. Like, hey, I'm here and your friend's not there.
Yep.
And so those have become like being willing to make new friends, adapt in those kind of things. You've got to be ready for that. Because some of us, I get it. You're like, well, these are my friends.
Yeah.
These are the two that I need. And I go, maybe you might recognize, I need this next component in my life.
Yeah.
And they're not there.
Yeah. And the same.
And it's not fair to put that all on one friend.
Well, sure. The same is inversely true. Like when, like I remember going to a church one time and I had a guy tell me, well, I just don't become friends with the pastors because they're going to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, I really thought we were going to go somewhere. Like you had that expectation of friendship, right? Like you meet someone, you're like, oh man, we both love this. We both love this. This is going to be a no-brainer. Like we're going to be friends. And you do, you hit it off, you're friends. And then eventually sometimes it happens in ministry where you go somewhere else. And I remember, I say all that to say this, like I remember distinctly getting a call here a couple of years ago that he called me and said, hey, because we've still remained friends and I'm super thankful for it. He goes, I get it now. Like I'm sad that I'm glad we were friends. I'm sad we didn't go to where I thought we could have maybe gone, right? But I get that you had to go to do this. And I was just like, man, I got off the phone with that and I was like, man, he's still a good friend and I love him to death. And again, that helped take, I believe, our friendship to another level. Like we can continue to talk and we can have really serious conversations because something is growing in him, something is growing in me. Like, and sometimes it works in the timeline that you wanted to. Sometimes it doesn't work in the timeline of you're like, I think you were kind of alluding to like, man, I really want this friendship, but they're not there. And then they get there and then you're like, wow, this is everything I hoped it would be. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes you have to have those honest conversations. Like you shared about me. Sometimes you think you have friendship with somebody and then suddenly it's gone. And that and that's hard. Like we play it off sometimes as guys, right? Specifically because we're guys, but I'm okay. I'll be fine. I don't need that friendship. And then you sit back and you reflect and you take time and go, man, I really grieving that friendship, that loss of that individual that was a part of my life that because of choices, decisions, or beliefs is not with me anymore. And there's a hole there. Yeah. So.
And I don't want to spend too much time on the negative side, but I think it's important to navigate because I think that's why so many people don't go after friends.
I would agree.
Because they go, I've been hurt so much. I just don't people suck. I'm like, sorry, but isn't it true? I mean, we've all felt that before, but the reality is we've also probably been that friend before.
No, I've been guilty of sucking for quite some time. So,
but I would say one of the things I've had to learn in being a friend is, one, be willing to be a connector.
Yep.
Even if you're introverted, extrovert, it doesn't matter. At some point, you've got to be willing to go, I may need to start this conversation.
Absolutely.
I may need to go and reach out. I need to put myself in a place to where I can meet somebody new, and you never know where this could be. And I would say be willing to stretch yourself in that.
Mm-hmm.
Don't put the walls up from the past pains.
Yeah, absolutely.
Learn to not live a life that's going, nope, I don't want anybody getting close because anybody who gets close hurts me.
Yeah.
And and so that's why we go, well, I have to with my spouse. I have to with my kids. And I'm like, see, we're already at a space that's not in a good area. But I think the other side of this, and this is what I had to learn, is like, so as a pastor, sometimes you meet with people and you're like, okay, I feel like I'm playing counselor or pastor in this relationship. And so I remember one guy telling me, he's just like, hey, I feel like we meet a lot. We have great conversations, but I don't hear from you what you're walking through.
Yeah.
It's very one-sided. Yeah. And I went, that's fair. But I appreciated him being willing to be vulnerable with that. And so I was like, no, I think I'm going to pursue that with this relationship. And it's been awesome. Like, to be able to go, he's right. I'm not there just to give answers.
Yeah.
I'm also there to go, okay, how could they listen?
Yeah. Adversely, that's the nature of our job though, right? Like it really is. It's like, because that's a lot of times people want to meet with us for specifically those reasons. But we learn really quickly, and like anybody should, it's not just us as pastors. Like, we need friendships, and that's what I love about. I mean, we talk about options and time and spending time. So, like, maybe turning the script a little bit. There are so many things to connect over these days, right? Like, and obviously, I mean, I'll connect about smoking meats as much as the day is long, right? And like, well, you smoke meats? I smoke meats. All right, maybe you're a good smoker, and then you find out they're not a good smoker, and then you can't be friends. Anyway, no, but finding those things to connect with, and it doesn't have, man, it's dangerous. Don't like have the criteria. Well, if they don't hit this, this, and this, we're not going to be friends. Well, no, just you got to begin somewhere when it comes to friendship, right? And you've got to be vulnerable. Well, they're a Nebraska fan. We can't be friends. That's not, whatever. Go Hawkeyes. All right. Anyway, but we're probably going to get destroyed this year by the Nebraska. We'll see what happens. But anyway, all that being said, like, man, are we opening ourselves up to the conversations that could lead to friendship? Are we willing to put, like you were talking about, those past things, those hurts behind, and go, man, maybe I need to be open to something, because I believe God wants us to have friendships. I believe those connections. It can't be just our wife and our kids and that family circle, which are great friendships. But man, there's something about hanging out with dudes and doing life with other guys and having those conversations.
I think also having somebody in your life who's asking you some good accountability questions, who just loves kind of, hey, let's connect about that. And man, that just starts to make life more like, man, I've got other people I can bring some of these conversations to.
Absolutely.
And it also puts you in a spot to where you don't feel lonely. Yeah. And I feel like too much of our world, too many people feel lonely. Yeah. They don't know how to have who to have these conversations with. And I would say their spouse is not the right person to have the conversation with right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or their kids. Like, let's not have that conversation.
Can you imagine sitting one of your kids down and be like, all right, Dad's really got some tough things going on.
Yeah, right. Like, and so we keep putting people who aren't designed to carry some of that weight in those positions. I know spouse can be hard, but sometimes there's just things that I want to talk about as a guy that I go, Tina's not going to understand.
Yeah.
And nor do I want to bring some of that to her. There's a time to, but I'm not, it's not this back and forth with her. It's more, she's okay. What do you need me to do with that?
Yeah.
Versus another guy who's going, hey, I know that, I've been there. So what do you do? They're asking better questions. They've walked that road a little bit. And so to expect your spouse to be able to know how to help you in that is just not fair to put on them. So that's why I go. Now, there's other things that you're supposed to, you got to navigate parenting together.
Yep.
That's not going to be like best friend. Like
you can get wisdom from other people, but you better
you've got to navigate that together.
We've done that podcast. Check it out.
Right.
So
that's what I'm saying. Like, you've got to understand, like, am I putting the wrong things in this relationship?
Yeah.
Like, are my expectations of this relationship unhealthy?
Sure.
So that way you can have good friendships, but also have a healthy marriage and be a good parent, but you're not trying to put those things in those areas all the time.
Yeah, it really is kind of like that portfolio diversity, right?
Yeah.
Just if you're young, you can't just put it all right there. And we try to do that too, because there's excitement in that, whether it's a spouse or whatever kid, and we just try to invest everything. But man, it really is fun, and it's not always easy. It isn't, like, to receive that other information or somebody's tough question, or just even sometimes it's not even the tough questions. It's just the random question of going, oh, I need to be willing to open up here and just share, because I want all this from them, or I expect them to be the one that shares, and that healthy back and forth of like, man, I met with a guy today, and just going back and forth with him and just hearing how he does. I was just really encouraged and inspired by, like, he and I may never be friends, like on a let's hang out, but I'm just really, man, as I grow older, and I wish I would have done this earlier, continuing to be more open to the people that God brings into my life, or the people that I connect with, that, like, oh man, I'm just really grateful for this interaction, and let's see where it leads, and maybe I had expectations and thoughts, and I shut a friendship down that could have been amazing. And that's on me. You're right. And you can't dwell on that. It is what it is. But, like, really, as a dad, as a husband, as a guy that's gone through life, man, I'm really valuing the experiences and the wisdom of other guys that are able to speak into my life, or just encourage me, or say, hey, I noticed something the other day. But then you have to make the decision, am I gonna, like you talked about, am I gonna share? Like, am I gonna be willing to share? Because friendship isn't just a one-sided thing. It is a back and forth thing. And
Oh, and you got to make time for it.
Yep.
If you say, oh no, those are my friends, and be like, well, when have you hung out with them, or when have you done something with them? And you're like, I don't know, last month. I'd be like, okay.
Yeah.
There's got to be some consistency to it. And so that's the part you just got to look at and be like, okay. And please don't, like, I see people do it. They put all this pressure on this, like, no, I need this to be a friendship now.
Yep.
Sometimes there's seasons where it's like, man, it just doesn't feel like I'm making those connections.
Yep.
And you pray and you let God answer that for you. Some of that also is a season to look at yourself and be like, man, am I not a good friend?
Yeah.
Am I too demanding? Am I too controlling? Am I all those kind of things that can kind of sabotage a relationship?
Yep. Yeah, that is really difficult, because nobody wants to answer those questions, like, oh man, it is me. And I think I probably have been there in moments like where I've overcalled or whatever, and like I have more time on, and you're not respectful of the time that they have or they need, right? Like, hey, this is a really busy season for them. They're not shunning you, they're not staying away from you. But, like, I agree though, like, and it goes back to some things we've already talked about, like putting things on the calendar, like, hey, when are we going to get together? And, sometimes as couples, that's the hard, I don't know about it for you. Like, sometimes that's the hard part. Like, you may want to have friendship with somebody, but you're like, our spouses, not that they don't get along, but they're that connection doesn't mesh across the whole relationship.
Yeah.
And it just is what it is. Right.
Yeah. If you find that, I think if you're, let's say you have a couple friends and spouses get along, and you're like, man, this is great, but that's pretty rare sometimes.
It is very rare.
Because you're like, oh, okay. We connect, but they don't.
Yep.
And we'll kind of
so
make
my
that
spouse is the problem. No, I'm kidding. No, Rachel's not going to watch this anyway. So I mean,
I think the other component that I would bring into this is, like, sometimes we can feel like, you've alluded to it, I feel like I'm doing all the connection.
Yeah.
And it's not being reciprocated. I'd say don't take that so personally. Just recognize that's where the friendship is at. Because if you take it personally, man, you're constantly going to be upset.
Yes, absolutely.
There's just people who you'd be like, oh man, that'd be a good friend. But you just got to wait and see, like, are they wanting to reciprocate it? If not, then you go, that's where the relationship's at. It's more an acquaintance, all those kind of things. And you look for the person who you're reaching out, you're saying it, but now it's, oh, okay, it's being reciprocated. and also be willing. You may not be the person you think you will be.
Yeah. Yep. And I would say for me, I'm just okay being that connector sometimes. I love it because I want to just keep that connection. And you're right. It's a good friendship, but it's, the things you talk about, we talk about that. I think and I think we probably did it in a damaging way sometimes as believers. We say, oh, we're friends, but there's only so much we can talk about. And that's true for anything, right? Like whether you're a believer or not a believer, you could say, well, we just run out of things to talk about. Well, sometimes you don't run out of things to talk about, whether somebody's a believer or not a believer. But I would say there are things that are just so fulfilling when you do get to talk with somebody. Like you and I can talk about being dads and being husbands and coaching. But man, then there's conversations you and I have about, wow, man, God's doing this in my life. And some friendships just don't go down that avenue or that road. And that's so fulfilling. So
I think if you want to be a good friend, one of the best ways is make time to connect, but also be good at asking good questions.
Yep.
Because that helps you be able to, some people love to be around somebody who asks good questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that doesn't mean everybody will.
Yeah.
But the people that you're like, oh man, this has been a great relationship. Yep. I think you'll be blown away if you've got some good questions to ask.
Well, and I think, and then you have to ask yourself, secondly, have you put up walls? Have you been aversely just kind of sabotaging possible friendships that you could be having, or things maybe you've been making excuses. You're like, I don't need friendships right now. Like you were talking about, it's just a busy season. Listen, I think in the busier season, that's all the more reason why we need friendships and we need to connect with people, because man, sometimes carrying that load of life and of busyness needs to come out and like, hey, man, would you pray for me? Or would you just, man, keep me accountable? Shoot me a call every now and then.
Listen, I need help processing this. And you don't know how much you need until you get done with them. Absolutely. And you're like, man, I needed that.
Man, that felt good.
I needed that today.
Yeah. No, I think so. It's powerful. So I don't know where you find yourself in this friendship spectrum. But I hope that you could be encouraged that, like, what does friendship look like now for you? And what have you been doing to be a good friend? And maybe it's like, maybe you need to apologize. I've been a bad friend lately, and I haven't been asking you real questions. I mean, hey, hope it's going good. Love the weather. All right, this is great. How about our team? Right? It's more than that. So, man, I hope it's been a blessing. Like maybe you want to share this to somebody. Tell somebody about, hey, I was listening to this podcast. Todd had a lot of good things to say today, and you should listen to that. No,
that's not true.
But I think it's vital. We want you to have good friendships, and they are a vital part of doing life. So hope you'll tune in next time, and we'll see you then.